The Sterling family had welcomed me with polite smiles for 2 years. Old money, old traditions, old judgments. To them, I was never truly one of them. I was just the girl who didn't belong in their perfect world. And on that day, at their grand estate in Massachusetts, I finally understood they had been waiting for the perfect moment to remind me of exactly where I stood. My name is Elena. I'm a restoration architect in Boston. My job is to uncover what others try to hide and to see cracks before everything collapses. I just never expected that skill would save my life on my own wedding day. Through that reflection, I watched Eleanor walk in. She didn't know I could see her every move. She looked at my glass of champagne sitting on the mahogany bar. With a swift, predatory movement, she pulled a small glass vial from her silk sleeve and dropped exactly 3 drops of a clear liquid into my drink. In that moment, my heart was beating at 80 beats per minute. High, but controlled. I didn't turn around. I didn't scream. Panic is a luxury I cannot afford. When you find a crack in a foundation, you don't fear it, you measure it. I waited for her to leave the room to greet her high society friends. Then, with the steady hands of someone who has handled priceless artifacts for years, I reached out, and I swapped the glasses. What she had prepared for me was now in her hand, and the real wedding drama was about to begin. Most brides would have collapsed in tears, but I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked at my veil, the one Eleanor had intentionally torn the day before. I had repaired it using the kintsugi technique, stitching the lace back together with fine gold thread. I didn't hide the scar. I made it part of the design. Eleanor thought she could buy me off. 6 months ago, she slid a $500,000 check across her desk and told me to disappear. She called my hands filthy because they were stained with the dust of my work. I tore that check to pieces and told her that the truth wasn't for sale. From that day on, she stopped trying to buy me and started trying to destroy me. She wanted me humiliated. She wanted me to lose control of my body and mind in front of 200 of the most powerful people in the country. She wanted a descender. I simply decided to let her be the victim of her own design. I picked up my glass of plain water and prepared to walk into the ballroom. I could hear the music starting, a beautiful, hollow melody. I saw Ethan waiting for me, a man who saves lives every day, but has no idea his own mother is a parasite. As I walked toward him, the click of my heels on the oak floor sounded like a countdown. I saw Eleanor take her seat, raising that poison glass to me with a triumphant smile. She thought it was checkmate. She thought she was the architect of this night. But she forgot one thing about restorers. We know exactly where the weaknesses are, and we know exactly when a structure is about to fall. Stay with me, because the foundation is about to crack, and the Sterling legacy is about to meet its match. The moment I swapped those champagne flutes, time didn't just slow down, it stopped. I stood there, staring at the glass in my hand, the clean one, and the one sitting next to it carrying a death sentence for the dignity of the very woman who had brewed it. I asked myself, am I being too cruel? But then I remembered a Tuesday evening last November. Eleanor had invited me to a private tea just for the 2 of us. As I lifted my cup, she looked at my hands calloused from years of holding chisels and trowels and said to her maid, right in front of me, "Maria, use the cheap porcelain for Ms. Elena from now on. I don't want a laborer's hands scratching my Ming collection." In that moment, my heart cracked just a little. And tonight I was simply fusing those pieces back together with a very cold, very hard truth. I stepped into the gala. The crystal chandeliers were so bright they were blinding. Ethan was there, standing among men in tuxedos and women dripping in diamonds. He looked radiant. When he caught my eye, his face lit up with a pure, innocent trust. He had no idea that just behind him, his mother was holding a champagne flute with the smile of an executioner. "There you are, Elena," Ethan whispered, kissing my forehead. "Mom is waiting to give the toast." I took my seat at the head table. Eleanor sat directly across from me. She picked up her glass, the glass I had swapped, with a confidence that was almost terrifying. She didn't check it. Why would she? In her world, she controlled everything. She was the architect of this lie. The 15-minute countdown began. She stood up. The sound of a silver spoon tapping against a crystal glass rang out, cutting through the chatter of 200 guests. She began her speech. Every word that left her lips was sweet like honey, but I could taste the venom underneath. She spoke of the sterling legacy, of sacrifice, and of welcoming me, a breath of fresh air from the outside world. To the happiness of my son and his new bride, Eleanor said, her eyes locking onto mine with a gaze as sharp as a razor blade. Cheers. She tilted her head back. I watched that golden liquid slide down her throat. 1 gulp. 2. She drained it as if she were swallowing her final victory. 5 minutes in. She sat down, still laughing, still talking. My chest felt tight. I wasn't joyful. I just felt a hollow, crushing emptiness. I looked at Ethan, who was beaming with pride. I wondered if he would ever be able to smile like that again after tonight. 10 minutes in, I saw Eleanor begin to tug at her silk collar. She started fanning herself with her hand, even though the ballroom was chilled to 65 degrees. Her expensive foundation began to crack under the sudden sweat. She turned to say something to my father, but her words started to slur, becoming a mumble of incoherent syllables. My father looked at her, confused and concerned. 15 minutes in, the structure completely collapsed. Suddenly, Eleanor went silent. She gripped the edge of the mahogany table, her knuckles turning white. A strange gurgling sound erupted from her throat like water boiling in a closed pot. "Mom? Are you okay?" Ethan asked, his voice laced with sudden panic. She couldn't answer. Eleanor tried to stand, but her body betrayed her. Whatever she had taken began tearing through her system. She doubled over, vomiting violently right onto the banquet table, over the silver platters of lobster and the hand-painted china. It drenched her $20,000 silver silk gown. Everything happened so fast. Guests scrambled to their feet. Screams broke out. People recoiled from the sudden, wretched stench. Eleanor collapsed to the floor, convulsing in the very mess she had intended for me. In the chaos, I stood there motionless. I saw her clutch bag lying under the table. The latch had snapped open. Her belongings were scattered everywhere. A lipstick, a compact mirror, the empty glass vial, and the cream-colored papers. I reached down and picked them up. These weren't just notes. They were the draft of a press release ready to be sent to the Boston Globe. She had planned to release it tomorrow morning, claiming I had overdosed and had been committed to a psychiatric ward. She wasn't just trying to ruin my night. She was trying to erase my entire life. Ethan rushed to his mother's side, but his eyes froze when he saw me holding those papers. He looked at me, then at the black ink on the elegant stationery. I saw his heart break right there, reflected in his eyes. "Elena." "What is this?" Ethan whispered, his voice disappearing into the sound of sirens wailing at the estate gates. I didn't answer. I simply handed him the empty vial and the papers. The job of a restorer is to find the truth, and the truth sometimes is more devastating than death itself. Stay with me for the final part, where the sterling legacy finally meets its end. The hallways of Massachusetts General Hospital were cold and smelled of sharp antiseptic. Eleanor was out of danger, but the empire she had built was in ruins. The poison had been flushed from her system, but the image of her collapsing in her own mess was permanently burned into the memory of every powerful guest at that wedding. I sat in the waiting room, still holding the pre-written press release that proved her guilt. Ethan walked out of the intensive care unit. He looked like he had aged 10 years in a single night. He didn't speak at first. He just stood there staring at the floor, realizing that his life was built on a foundation of lies. This was the final stress test. Either he would protect the toxic legacy of his mother, or he would choose the truth. "Elena," he said, his voice raw and hollow. "She's awake. She wants to see us." We walked into the private room. Eleanor lay there, her face pale, stripped of the jewelry and the silk that made her feel powerful. Even now, she tried to play her final card. She whispered, "Ethan, I did it for you. She's a common laborer. She doesn't belong in our world. I was only trying to save you from a mistake." She was trying to use 30 years of motherhood to negotiate for her crime, but she forgot who she was talking to. Ethan is a surgeon. He knows that when a limb is necrotic, you have to amputate it to save the life. Ethan didn't cry. He stepped forward and placed the empty vial and her own malicious script on the bedside table. His voice was as cold as a surgical blade. "You weren't protecting me, Mother. You were destroying the person I love. And in doing so, you destroyed yourself. From the moment you wrote these lies to throw my wife into an asylum, you ceased to be my mother." She began to scream, calling him ungrateful, accusing me of brainwashing him. But Ethan simply turned to the police officer standing at the door. "I am officially pressing charges for aggravated assault and defamation. I want a permanent restraining order for myself and my wife. Now." The moment he signed that statement, I knew we were free. It wasn't about the prison sentence. It was about the fact that Ethan had finally seen the structural failure of his own family and chose to walk away. 1 year has passed since that night. We don't live in the Sterling estate. We live in a small, old house on the outskirts of the city, a place with good bones that just needed a little love. I am sitting at my workbench today, repairing a broken ceramic bowl. I am using a Japanese technique called kintsugi. I don't hide the cracks. I fill them with lacquer mixed with pure gold. The philosophy is simple. An object is more beautiful and resilient because it has been broken. My marriage to Ethan is just like this bowl. Eleanor tried to shatter us, but those broken pieces allowed us to see what we were truly made of. Ethan walked away from the Sterling fortune to live a life of honesty. We don't have the galas anymore, but we have a foundation that won't ever crack again. Eleanor is serving her sentence in a federal facility. Her lawyers tried to plead insanity, but you can't claim a moment of madness when you've meticulously planned a character assassination 3 days in advance. My friends, the lesson I've learned is this: do not fear the cracks in your life. Sometimes everything must fall apart completely so that something better, something real can be built in its place. Have the courage to cut out the toxins, even if they share your blood. You deserve a home built on the truth. Thank you for spending this quiet moment with us on Midnight Ivy Stories. May these stories remind you that even through the deepest cracks, something stronger can grow.